Juan Soto is a New York Met. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome into First Pitch, your daily source of news, updates, and opinions on all things Major League Baseball. And I really don't think we have much to talk about today, Christian. What do you think?
Yeah, let's just go get some breakfast. I could need another cup of coffee. I don't think there's much to talk about. I don't even think there's anything to discuss, right? No free
Uh,
agent signings, nothing big, no passing bombs this weekend, right?
oh, wait. I do think I saw that Juan Soto signed a contract, like the smallest contract in baseball history.
Could you imagine living under a rock this past weekend and just not having that news drop from you? If you're the first time hearing this, if we're the first person hearing this from you, Juan Soto is a New York Met. Okay, I think the craziest thing that I saw, Troy, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this on this show, but how
Please
upset
don't.
Yankees fans are, how upset they are on social media. Oh boy, oh boy. My brother's a Yankees fan, and I can tell you, and he's probably going to hate me for this. He's already talking about, well, the Yankees did offer this, but it just didn't happen. But he's already looking forward. I will say he's being more optimistic than I have seen in the past from him. He's already looking forward. Like, well, that means we can sign both Corbin Burns and Max Fried. It's like typical Yankees fan. Bring it on. Bring it on.
Absolutely. Well, this is First Pitch. My name is Troy Brock. You can find me on Twitter at Troy B Baseball. He is Christian Rao. You can find him on Twitter at Christian S. Rao. If you're listening to the podcast version, make sure you give us that 5-star rating. It helps us out tremendously. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a like, hit that subscribe button, turn that notification icon on, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think about the Juan Soto news and how you feel about him signing with the Mets as opposed to the Yankees or whoever your team may be, because this is just massive news. And for those that were living under a rock, he signed a 15-year, longest deal in Major League Baseball history, broke Bryce Harper's record, 15-year, $765 million deal with the New York Mets. And Christian, do you know how much of that is deferred?
None, right? Yeah,
None
zero.
of it. Not a single deferral.
Insane.
So thank you to the
So
Mets for
you're
no
talking about
deferrals.
you're talking about two of the most exciting baseball players in history that he's compared to, Bryce Harper and then Shohei Ohtani, and he outdid them both. If you think about it in this aspect when it comes to a contract. Now, it seems like every year somebody's trying to beat somebody else out. So I'm sure will not last long. I'm sure within the next 3 or 4 years, somebody's going to beat Juan Soto's deal. It seems like it always happens. I don't know who that's going to be as of right now, but you got to think that that's going to happen in the near future, that somebody's going to beat out Juan Soto's contract moving forward. But I will say this, the craziest stat to me with all of this is not the deferrals, it is the years, because he has signed through 2040, Troy. Let's put that into perspective real quick. Kids who just started kindergarten this year, just a couple months ago, will graduate in 2038. They will graduate high school in 2038. Kids that are in kindergarten right now will be a sophomore in college the time that Juan Soto's contract expires.
That
They
is
will
just
be
absolutely insane.
a year away from being legal drinking age in the United States. Insane.
That contract's insane, and he's entering his age 26 season. So in 15 years, he'll be 40. I also saw that after year 11 of his deal, the Mets will be done paying Bobby Bonilla. So that's a little bit of help on the back end of his
That's
contract.
$1 million, right? What is that in Steve Cohen terms? Nothing much, but yeah.
He finds that in the cushions of his couch. But we do have to
Yeah.
talk about the implications that this has on the Mets, as well as every other team that was in on Juan Soto, and specifically the Yankees, who would seem to come down to the Yankees and the Mets. But let's go with the Mets first, since he is now a New York Met and will be playing in Queens. And Christian, how do you see Juan Soto helping this Mets team in 2025 and beyond?
Oh, I mean, it's huge. It's a big change, and I think this is exactly what Steve Cohen was looking for the first time around 2 years ago when he was willing to spend, all the money in the world and change the aspect of how we view baseball and free agency and et cetera and all that good stuff. But this is exactly what Steve Cohen was looking for. This is exactly what the Mets organization was looking for. I think Jeff Passan, ESPN insider for baseball, said it perfectly last night on ESPN when he was talking with Scott Van Pelt. He said Juan Soto saw a better future with the Mets than he did the Yankees. Now I'm paraphrasing just a little bit. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but that's what he said. He was really focused. He thinks, this is what Jeff Passan thinks. This is not what Juan Soto thinks, by the way. He thinks that Soto saw a better future with the Mets than the Yankees. And it's hard to disagree with that because the Yankees are getting a little bit older, although you still have Volpe and all that good stuff. But Judge is getting on the older side. Although on the Mets side, Lindor is still there on that age as well. But there's more room for growth with the Mets. Pete Alonso doesn't look like he's going to be returning. Looks like Mark Vientos is going to sit that first base. The pitching staff is not solidified, but that means there's room to grow. And although there's no deferred money for Juan Soto, meaning a lot of that money is on the books in 2025 and beyond, their owner is not afraid to build a team around a guy like Juan Soto. I'll go out and put my hot take right now. In the next 15 years, I would not be shocked if 5 of the World Series go to the New York Mets.
5 of the World Series in the next 15 years. That is a
bookmark it.
That is a very hot take. Yes, please, somebody bookmark that because that's a very hot take. So the way I see this for the Mets signing Juan Soto, they still have little to no pitching. And they are kind of approaching this from a Dodgers perspective of things, where the Dodgers have loaded up on offense. Yes, the Dodgers do have big name pitchers. They have Blake Snell. They have Tyler Glasnow. They have Yoshinobu Yamamoto. But none of those guys have consistently stayed healthy. And the Dodgers are aware of that. And that's why they've signed so many of them. They also have Shohei Ohtani, who is expected to pitch at some point in 2025. But he's another guy, and I've said this before and got a lot of hate for it in the comments, but I'll say it again. He has not pitched much in his time in Major League Baseball. Since 2018, his debut season, he has averaged 12 starts a year. And two years, he has not started any at all in 2024 and earlier in the 2020s. I don't remember exactly what year it was. And for the Mets, that's kind of, they don't have guys. They have Kodai Senga, who has been hurt so far throughout his career in Major League Baseball. But outside of him, they really don't have anybody else. They signed Frankie Montas, and if he's their 2, who by the way is also frequently injured, and if he's their 2, that's not a good rotation. And for me, the Dodgers play, for everyone, obviously, it's common sense. The Dodgers play in the National League West, not just for me. And the Mets play in the National League East. And since the Mets play in the National League East, it's a much, much, much tougher division than the National League West. In the National League East, you have one team at the bottom tier of baseball, and that's the Marlins. The Nationals are an up-and-coming team. They're probably going to be a lot closer to 500 in 2025 than many people realize.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
They also have to face the Phillies consistently, who have one of the best lineups in baseball and who are looking to improve that lineup. They also have to face the Braves consistently, who were not as good in 2024 as they have been over the rest of the last few years, but they're still the Braves. They also made the playoffs with 2 of their best players not playing for most of the season, and their 3rd best player being in the worst slump of his career for the majority of the season. So go ahead.
I was going to say, I love the fact that you just found a way to get Phillies good, Braves not so good in this podcast somehow, some way. I love how you found a way to do that. But continue. Go ahead.
I hope Lindsay enjoys that. But it's the Braves are going to be a lot better in 2025 than they were in 2024, especially if Marcell Ozuna can continue what he did in 2024, because Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to be healthy. Spencer Strider is going to be healthy. Matt Olson is probably not going to be in the worst slump of his career again. And so while Juan Soto is going to be a massive addition to their lineup, and it's a very good signing for them, is it enough, Christian?
Is it enough? As of right now, the way the roster sits, no, it's not enough. And I think we've discussed this a couple times when we've talked about how, moving forward, you can't build a team around Juan Soto based on this contract. And we've talked about that. We were more looking at the eyes of the New York Yankees because we thought he was going to re-sign with the Yankees. With Steve Cohen, I think that changes. And I think he's the only owner in baseball where that narrative changes, Troy. Because regardless of the contract you signed from Juan Soto, I don't think that the game plan is going to change for the front office of the New York Mets with David Stearns, with Steve Cohen, regardless of the case. Now, we kind of already knew that Pete Alonso was going to be out the door before the whole Juan Soto sweepstakes. If you knew anything about David Stearns, he's not a big first baseman guy. He doesn't believe in the value of that position, at least in the eyes of paying a top guy, even if he hits 50 home runs a season like Pete Alonso. So I do think that there's a solid reason why he's out the door. But I do think that they're not done. And going back to my take saying I think there's going to be 5 World Series in the next 15 years for the Mets because of this, 2025 is not going to be one of those years. I think they're still a playoff team, even how they sit right now. Even with that pitching staff, as of right now, I still think they're a playoff team. Even
Absolutely.
in the toughest division in baseball, I still think they're a playoff team. But I don't think that this is what they're going to end off with. I still think they're going to add at least 1 or 2 more pitchers. Now, it might not be a Corbin Burns or Max Fried or anything along those lines. And I think we've kind of learned that with Frankie Montas signing just over the past couple of weeks. But looking at this rotation, it's really not as bad as you think. Kodai Senga, if he's healthy, I mean, he only pitched 6 innings in the regular season last year. If he shows any kind of improvement, which you got to think that he's going to pitch more than 6 innings, right? You got to think that that's going to be fantastic in moving forward. Montas, he looked better after the trade last year from the Reds to the Brewers, and you got to think that that's going to improve as well, right? David Peterson, he's been pretty solid the middle of your rotation. Paul Blackburn was once an all-star for the Oakland Athletics and then kind of fell off a little bit after getting traded for nickels and dimes to the Mets. If they can find a way to get him back into the same lineup and even get close to just even Peterson, let alone just an all-star thing, he could be an underrated part of this rotation. And they did just sign Clay Holmes. And the reason that I bring that up is because he could go into the rotation. There's a potential of him moving into the rotation with Edwin Diaz sitting back there, with Reed Garrett, with Sean Reed Foley, with those guys in the bullpen. Clay Holmes could find himself in the rotation, at least for a little bit, until one of their top pitching prospects, Brandon Sprout, which I think is very close for making it to the majors, is ready to take the one over that spot. And then you can move Clay Holmes into the back into the bullpen. But just as it sits right now, I think they still have the 3rd best pitching rotation in the National League East. And you add Juan Soto to that mix in the bats, that's enough for me to say they make the playoffs. That's why I still think they're going to add a little bit more. And I think it's going to be one more pitching arm to maybe make that conversation right off the bat. If Clay Holmes can just sit in the bullpen, they don't have to make that decision. And I think that's good. That's a fantastic thing to have. When Brandon Sproat comes up, then you have a 6-man rotation. So I'm a little bit more optimistic about these Mets. And that's something that you won't hear me say much on this show. You can say, I grew up a New Yorker, right? I grew up a Yankees fan. My parents, my family was Yankees fans. I luckily got away from it, but by no way, shape, or form am I a Mets fan. And let me just say this: I do think they're on the right path, and what Steve Cohen has done, and what these fans deserve it. After dealing with the Wilpons for so long, these fans deserve this. They deserve the Juan Soto signing. It's going to be really exciting to see how they handle this and how they handle the entire Soto for the next 15 years or whatever the case may be with him. But I do think that they're on the right path, and they're not going to slow down. There's not going to be a year in the next 5-8 years where they miss the playoffs. There's no way. I can't see it. I really think Juan Soto is going to be a huge X factor for this team.
Yeah, no. I agree that they can definitely make the playoffs with the team they have now. It's just, as it stands right now, I'm just not sure of their World Series chances. As it stands right now, we will look at the projected lineup on Fangraphs is already out. They have Francisco Lindor leading off, Juan Soto batting second, Mark Vientos batting third, Brandon Nimmo in cleanup, Starling Marte DHing and batting fifth, Jeff McNeil sixth, Tyrone Taylor seventh, Francisco Alvarez eighth, and Brett Beatty ninth. And as far as the rotation goes, they have Kodai Senga as the ace, Frankie Montas, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, and Paul Blackburn. So that is what Fangraphs projects as their opening day lineup and rotation. And looking at Spot Rack, they have, including the Juan Soto signing, they have $206 million $204 million. I'm sorry, $204 million on their books for 2025. And that's not including the projected arbitration. That is just what is on their books right now. So knowing that, and they have about 30 million more in projected arbitration figures, what's left? Who do you think would be the Mets' next piece that they go after in free agency?
Yeah, I'm thinking a middle infielder. That's what I'm thinking right now. I think a middle infielder because of what you saw from Jeff McNeil in this last season. He definitely declined. There was some hopes, there's sparks, if you will, at moments, but I don't know if you can willingly say that he can be your everyday second baseman moving into 2025. So I think you're going to see them move maybe for another infielder. Wouldn't be shocked maybe if they went after another Yankee, right? I mean, could you imagine Gleyber Torres as the second baseman for the Mets? I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? It would fit, and they have the money to do it. So I'm not saying without saying, I mean, Gleyber Torres would be a perfect fit on the Mets right now. If they don't go middle infield, I think you could see them maybe potentially trying to get another just a slugger, to help the DH spot. Maybe a guy like Paul Goldschmidt, right? They got Mark Vientos at first base, but he can also play at different spots. He can also play third base if they're not happy with Brent Beatty. Go get Paul Goldschmidt, a low contract, low risk reward, who can still hit, who can still play really good defense. You can have him play first, switch some times with DH as well over Starling Marte. So I think that's where I sit right now, is a little bit more infield help. And I'm pointing at second base, and this is the first time I said it out loud, but man, Gleyber Torres to the Mets, that'd really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that would be a very good fit. And as far as Brett Beatty goes, there were rumors over the weekend that they are willing to move on from him. So Paul Goldschmidt is also another possibility. Maybe even Christian Walker. If Steve Cohen wants to go all out and break the bank, bring in Christian Walker and
it would go against what I said about David Stearns and how he values first baseman, but I mean, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, he's not the one that's signing the checks, right? So I'm sure David Stern would love to sign every all-star he can. And you got to think he came from Milwaukee, where he was coming from a low market team. Maybe he didn't value first baseman because he wanted to use that money elsewhere. He's talking about a guy that's not afraid to build a bridge in Steve Cohen, where he'll spend everything under the sun. So maybe his mindset and his strategy changed a little bit. But what we know from Stearns, what we know from him, is that he doesn't value the first base position that way. So I'm hesitant to say Christian Walker, but man, if they did something like that, it'd be insane.
That would definitely immediately throw them at the top of the National League East. But before we talk about the Yankees and how sad and mad their fans are, which we will get to, don't worry. We do have to touch on the contract deal. He does have an opt-out after 5 seasons. And so if he does choose to opt out, the Mets can void that opt-out by moving the rest of his deal to $55 million a year instead of $51 million a year, adding an extra $40 million onto his deal, which would make it in turn $805 million. So in 5 seasons, Christian, do you think A, Juan Soto is going to opt out, and B, if he does opt out, do the Mets add that $4 million a year for the 10 seasons following to keep him on the roster?
I mean, unless we get another huge inflation run in this country, I can't see why either team would want to get rid of Juan Soto and why Juan Soto want to leave the Mets on that contract. I will say that he will probably play a little bit of semantics if we are around that time, thinking that he might opt out, just maybe bump that up to $55 million, just to kind of put that there, and that would just be good business on his behalf. But if I'm a betting man right now, Juan Soto is going to remain a New York Met for the rest of his career, and in 5 years' time, he's going to be making $55 million a year, not 51. And that's chump change. And I love that I can say that. And an extra $4 million a year is at the $55 million. That's chump change when you're looking at this contract, though. But because it really is, when you're looking at spending that much money, and especially in 2029, 2030, when you're having this conversation, 51 million to 55 million, 765 to 800 million, it's probably not going to be that much of a difference. But as long as Steve Cohen is still running the Mets at that time, he's not sold it off. He hasn't, there hasn't been a bankruptcy. There hasn't been a stock market crash. There isn't anything like that has happened. I think Juan Soto is pretty safe with New York.
Yeah, to your point on it being chump change, the extra $4 million would be an increase of only 7.8% from $51 million to $55 million. So definitely chump change. But The Yankees reportedly were the final team in on Soto in the running before he signed with the Mets. And they reportedly offered Soto $760 million for 16 years. So an extra year, but $5 million less on the total value of the contract. We've already kind of touched on it with Soto liking the Mets over the Yankees for how the future looks for the teams. And I do agree with you that the future does look better for the Mets than the Yankees, especially, as I've said multiple times on this show, with them still having Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone as general manager and manager, who they are just for some reason reluctant to move off of either of them. Looking at the Yankees now, where do they go from here? What is their next move this winter to pivot off of Juan Soto? They have to do something, right?
If they do it the right way, and if they continue knowing that they are willing to spend this money in 2025 regardless, if they do it the right way, this could be the best thing that ever happened to the New York Yankees. I mean, if you were willing to spend $700+ million on one player, the fact that you're already we're a World Series contender in 2024 with Juan Soto, of course, I get that. But if you can spend and push that money out against, and let me go back to what my brother's comment was, hey, what if you got Corbin Burns and Max Fried? I don't think that's going to happen. But if you get one of those players, let's just say you go ahead and get Corbin Burns. Both of those players, by the way, have had Zoom meetings with the Yankees. So they are in ties with New York. This is not out of the question. Let's say you get Corbin Burns. You add him along with Rondon, Garrett Cole. I mean, that's a heck of a rotation just for them three, right? And then you go ahead and replace Juan Soto with Anthony Santander. Maybe you make a trade for Cody Bellinger. Those pieces right there are going to be a lot less than $700 million. So you probably make Steinbrenner's a little happy, but you are still in great position to get right back to the Fall Classic like you did in 2024. I think this could be the best thing that could ever happen to the Yankees, missing out on Juan Soto. Not saying that Juan Soto is going to, put a pain in their side for the next 15 years, knowing that they missed out on them by $5 million in an extra year. But I do think that there's still a chance for this team to compete at a very high level, still make it back to the World Series, and do amazing things. So I'm going to go off the bat and say they need to get one of those star pitchers, Corbin Burns or Max Fried, need to be a New York Yankee. And then they need to go ahead and get one of those big corner outfielders like a Teoscar Hernandez or an Anthony Santander to make it worth it to say, yes, we didn't get Soto, but we are primed and ready to go for 2025. Look at this roster. It's absolutely stacked. And I think they can do that.
Yeah, and looking at their projected lineup from Fangraphs, they have Anthony Volpe leading off in 2025, Jazz Chisholm Jr., Aaron Judge, Austin Wells, Giancarlo Stanton, Jason Dominguez, but we'll see if that actually happens or not, DJ LeMahieu, Oswaldo Cabrera, and Trent Grisham as their starting lineup on opening day. As far as the rotation goes, Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Clark Schmidt, Marcus Stroman, and Luis Hill. So it's definitely not a bad roster. It would have looked a lot better with Juan Soto still in the mix for sure. And if they are going to add a guy like an Anthony Santander or a Teoscar Hernandez, it would be even better at a much lower price. And looking at their payroll, they have $193 million already on the books for 2025, not including their arbitration projections, which add another $36 million. So after arbitration projections, just under $230 million on their books, and they still have additions that they need to make. But with saying that, as someone who grew up a Yankees fan and whose family is a Yankees fan, are the fans justified in being angry at Juan Soto leaving, quote unquote, leaving to go to the Mets, their crosstown rival?
Oh, it's got to be it's just got to hurt. It's got to hurt knowing that he went to the Mets. And justified, sure. I mean, why not? It's sports, right? If you're going to be upset, you're going to want to have that dedication, and you're going to want that fan loyalty that obviously didn't happen. Now, he was only with the Yankees for a season, so, that's one case. But the Yankees are used to getting those type of players sticking around. They want to be a Yankee, right? They don't want to go anywhere else. And this is the same kind of feeling as having a guy leave the Lakers to go to the Clippers, right? It's not something that you see every day. You don't see that happen. I mean, could you imagine? This is like saying Shaq would leave the Lakers to go to the Clippers after making it to the NBA Finals. Not winning it, but making it. That's like kind of the same aspect in this conversation. Juan Soto is going to be a Hall of Famer beyond that aspect. So I think you definitely have a feeling to be hurt. There's no doubt about that. People spend money on your jersey, go watch you play the games, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, I do think this is going to be a better thing for the Yankees. The conversation I said earlier, if this same contract went to the Yankees, I don't think I could say the same thing, that the Yankees would win 5 World Series in the next 15 years if they have Juan Soto. I think that the Mets can do that because the Mets have a clear path to do it. They have contracts that are bad contracts that are going away very soon or have already gone away, that they can build their team around Juan Soto. You can't say the same thing about the New York Yankees. So I think this is still the best thing that could happen to both teams. And if you're just a New York sports fan, if you like both the Yankees and the Mets, which is actually a thing that you can do, by the way, you're allowed to do that. It's not something that is against the rules. Okay. I don't care what anybody says. You gotta love it. And I'll tell you what, that series in May, the first time they meet up, is going to be absolutely electric.
Yeah. The bleacher creatures are going to be out in force. But to me, it is against the rule to be a Mets fan. But
if you're a Phillies fan, but like if you're a New York sports fan, they play in alternate leagues. I mean, if you're a New York Yankees fan or just a New York fan in general, you got to be rooting for the Subway Series every year. I mean, I would. I mean, it gives you a game, seven potential games to not even leave your city to watch the World Series. How could you not want that?
Yeah, and there was a possibility we could have got that this year. But you did say something that leads me to my final question of the day for you, and is you said that the Yankees fans generally expect the players to want to stay with the Yankees. So has that changed? Do players not want, other than Aaron Judge, are there players, is that sentiment changed? Do players not want to remain a Yankee? Is that not the goal of all players to play for the Yankees?
I think the aspect has changed slightly. I think that there's still a very large amount of players who grow up want to be a Yankee. It's the biggest sports brand in the world. There's no doubt about that. You go to any country. When I was in the military and I would pull in the different countries, you'd walk down the street and you'd see people wearing Yankees hats. It just doesn't change, right? No matter what country I was in, there was Yankee hats. There wasn't Mets hats. There wasn't, Oakland Athletic hats. There wasn't Philadelphia Phillies hats. It was the New York Yankees, right? It's just what it was. So I think that feeling is never going to go away per se. But I definitely feel like it's diminished a little bit. And I don't think that has to really do anything with the Yankees, but more of what other teams are doing, like Steve Cohen, not afraid to spend, not afraid to compete. And, with this, just the way that the new rules have changed and the ways that people are finding out how to play baseball and change the aspects of the rules and, be a small market team, but still compete like Tampa Bay Rays or, be able to find small loopholes, if you want to call them loopholes. I don't think they are, but with deferrals with Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers, I don't think that the whole aspect around wanting to be a Yankee has changed much, but it's enough to show that it's not a sure thing. If you're a free agent and the Yankees want you, it doesn't mean you're going to the Yankees. That's a whole different meaning that from 10 years ago. If we're talking 10, 15 years ago, if Juan Soto was a free agent, you might as well have just bought his ticket to the Bronx because he was going there. It was just happening, right? You might as well shave your face now, even though you're not signing for the next 6 months. But now it's changed, and that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, you can tell I would never be a Yankee because I'm not shaving this thing. So, but
there you go.
This has been First Pitch for you on Monday, December 9th. If you're listening on the podcast version, make sure you leave us that 5-star rating. It helps us out tremendously. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification icon. And again, let us know how you feel about Juan Soto signing with the Mets and spending at least the next 5 years, most likely the next 15 years in Queens. Christian, any final thoughts before we head out of here?
Stick with it. Next 15 years, Mets are going to win 5 World Series. I can't believe I'm saying it out loud, but might as well stick with it now. That's a huge hot take, and I'm going to run with it.
5 World Series in the next 15 years. That is a massive hot take, and it could definitely happen.
And if you're going school shopping, you might as well get a Mets jersey because the kids are going to grow up and Juan Soto as a Met.
This is absolutely correct. Until tomorrow, this has been first pitch.